welcome, ladies and gentlemen, once again to Ginger the Voice. We're at your doorstep, knocking and wanting your attention, needing your attention. Ginger the Voice, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. If you are here and you can see us tonight, I would like you to please just like our profile or video, or you can just jot something so that we can see that you are here with us tonight. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are here. Ginger the Voice is at your doorstep once again this evening, the 9th of September. Thank you very much. We can see you right there liking our video. We're super excited that you could join us today. We are having a great program tonight for all of those tertiary Mukhaso. We can also see you. Thank you for liking our page or our video tonight. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking cultural, or rather Heritage Month. We're celebrating September and we're so super excited because we're a country that has like a lot of heritage, a lot of cultural diversity. There's just a lot that we've been blessed with by God in South Africa, not just your buildings or your sites, historical sites, but we also have the climate that is so conducive. And actually, at one point or one stage in our lives, tourists would come all the way from your London area to come just for the sun, just for the pristine beaches that we have. So what a blessed country we are as South Africa to have such a great heritage from a natural point of view and such a rich history, and of course the cultural diversity that we have. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning. We'll just give it 2 seconds to allow our viewers to come through. It's 7:02 and our meeting is at 7 p.m. We usually give you the leeway or the allowance to just, tune in and settle down, as most people are back from work. Lockdown stage 2 or level 2, people do go to work now. So we're very happy to have you. Thank you so much for your time. We know that you're busy, but you took your time to come through to Ginger the Voice tonight. We'll give it 1 more second just to give our regular viewers to come through. Thank you so much. We can see you liking our page, or rather liking our profile or video tonight. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Ginger the Voice at your doorstep. We will start in a few seconds. And I think we've given our regular viewers enough time to join us tonight. Thank you so much. We need to keep to time. Unfortunately, therefore, we need to start. Greetings to everybody at home tonight, whether you're in the work space at the moment, at home, the comfort of your lounge or bedroom. Ginger the Voice greets you tonight. My name is Ginger, and I am the founder of Ginger the Voice. We're a company that seeks to give courage, enlightenment, and hope. And we do this through various platforms such as MC, speaking, singing, and also hosting talk shows. So here we are again on your doorstep tonight, as every Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are celebrating Heritage Month here in South Africa. And I've said before that we've got a rich heritage, we've got a rich cultural diversity here in South Africa. So tonight we decided to narrow it down to the workplace. We want to understand what heritage does the workplace give to our employees in South Africa, what cultural diversity is all about in the workplace, and talk about other traits that would need to be embedded as a culture in organizations so that they could strive. We all know that the economic globalization is actually the driving workforce or the driving force to cultural diversity. We've got people working in different organizations. They are from different nationalities, different countries. They're from different, obviously, gender groups, age groups, cultural groups, ethnic groups, racial groups, and also religious groups. So now the question is, how do we then make it work within the organization? How do we then ensure that as employers, we acknowledge everybody and ensure that everyone stays engaged? Because if people feel respected, that's the only way that they are engaged. You can pay them a lot of money, but if you do not respect where they come from, who they are, and also allow them to express themselves in the workplace, then you will definitely get a high turnover. So as employers and bosses today, we have a very, very great speaker, Kevin Britz, to talk to us about cultural diversity. But not only that, he will talk about culture within the organization. You know, we need to embed a culture of resilience. So that's one of the traits that he's going to be talking about tonight, because if you've got an employee or employees who are resilient, especially in these economic trying times, then you will have employees who are able to deal with setbacks, employees who will be able to manage risk, and employees will be able to stay engaged even though we're going through a challenging time. So we have tonight Kevin Britz to speak to us. He's a transformational coach. Kevin Britz is a leadership coach as well. So Kevin, thank you so much for coming through. We truly appreciate your time that you have put aside to talk to us, to empower us, to give us more enlightenment on cultural diversity, and also speaking about the culture of resilience that each and every employer needs to embed in their employees' life so that they can have a more productive workforce. Thank you so much, Kevin Britz. You know, before I ask you questions, who is Kevin Britz? Where are you from? What are you all about? Maybe you can just tell our viewers within the next 2-3 seconds.
2-3 seconds. Wow, that's such a big question. And thank you for you to give me the opportunity to chat to everyone. Thank you. My name is Kevin Britz. My business is Business by Design. I'm an executive coach, leadership facilitator, and host to the Lunchtime series on YouTube. And the leadership facilitation we do is based in neuroscience, behavior, and performance. But Ginger, you and I have a lot in common. We have shows.
Absolutely. I went through your vlog just a few days ago, and I picked up that I'm actually about to interview an interviewer. So yeah, we do have a lot in common.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the Lunchtime series is in aim specifically on what you're sharing, insights and views and just good information where people can really get some value add from it. And I would encourage people out there to go and check it out, because I chat to leaders in the world and coaches and specialists just to understand who they are, what they do, and give people out there advice on how to do it more effectively. So yeah, it's there's a wide variety and wide spectrum of what I do, but it really boils down to humans and human behavior. Ever since I can remember, I've had a keen interest on why people behave the way they do, and purely from experiences and going through moments where I didn't understand why I was behaving a certain way. And that's really where it stems from, So my curiosity has moved from just being in observation of people to really teaching people more about how our brain does, why our brain does what our brain does. So
okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I suppose one of the reasons people behave the way they do is because of culture. Okay, the values that they believe in actually drive them to behave in a way that they do. So we want to talk more about this in the workplace specifically. Maybe we can start off by asking a question: what is cultural diversity in the workplace?
So just to give you a bit of a technical input from that, cultural diversity is considered appreciating the society and what a society is made up of in different groups with different interests, skills, talents, and needs. It also looks and recognizes the society in a different religious beliefs and sexual orientation. And the reason why, for me, it's so important that why I have this as an entry point as well is very often, and I don't know if you've noticed, in the workforce and having conversations, but you mentioned values and you mentioned culture, and very often people throw these around as if they're just these rules that we automatically will live by because someone said we should, right? And I think the biggest misconception about what we as people in the world and the working force out there needs to really start paying attention to is what that actually means. Very specifically, from a cultural diversity perspective, considering not only understanding that we are South Africans, but also understanding that because we are South Africans, we have the diversity that we do. And because we have the diversity that we do, we quite specifically might be missing out on more than we realize, specifically when we're in a workplace and there's different nationalities and different languages happening. A lot of the time we're missing out on a lot that's happening in our culture and our diversity within that space than we realize, because we simply don't pay attention to it. So coming back on, from the value perspective, you ask a leader, you ask a company, so tell me what are those values you live by? And very often you can go through an actual process with people, and that's exactly what we do. We say, okay, cool, let's go through a values exercise and really understand what that looks like. The next part of that, from a values perspective, is saying to them, tell me what your value behaves like. Now, when you consider what a value behaves like, from a cultural perspective on how you ingrain a value system within an environment, most people don't know what that looks like. So you'll speak to CEOs, you'll speak to directors, you'll speak to people who are, in the front line making these decisions. And the moment you ask them, so what does your behavior, what does your value behave like? They don't know what the answer is. And what, from my entry point on why this is so important is, very often we think that cultural diversity is that stuff that those people who make decisions do, and that's not necessarily the truth. What we really need to start doing is asking ourselves, where does this lie and why is it even important? Can I carry on from that?
Okay, sorry. You are. I think this because of network. You are a bit forward. I get to hear you like a bit later.
Delayed. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, so you touching on why is it then diversity important in organizations? So what would you say to employers? Why do we have to have and acknowledge? Why do they have to address concerns around cultural diversity in an organization? Why is it so important?
So if we look at, I'm just going to raise three really important points. And the first thing is productivity. So bringing together people in various backgrounds from different life experiences can generate ideas and perspectives. Now, from a neuro-linguistics perspective, from a neuroscience perspective, what we know about humans is very often a lot of what we collate information and how we use information in our heads is broken down into segments, and we chunk this information into information. And when we chunk that information into our heads, we literally filter it through our own filters. By doing that, very often my filters, my background, my beliefs, my decisions, my memories, everything I know about me is how I filter this information. When I don't give it the time of day to pay attention to someone else's perspective, I do not have that filter, right? Okay. So quite specifically, if we do not consider that people have a different perspective, we may be losing out on a whole bunch of information and perspective in how we could be more productive in our own environment. Also, when I'm listening to your perspective and I'm paying attention to what you say from your version and your story of that version, suddenly I'm getting the perspective of who you are. And if I just listen, and we call it active listening, and that requires you to not speak, right? When you're actively listening, you're actively involved in the listening process. You're not answering or answering the question or answering the person because you already anticipate what they're saying. You're literally just keeping quiet, right? And it's so important, because if we do that and we start understanding why being diverse, having a different perspective in the workspace really gives us an opportunity to pay attention to productivity and how it could be done in a different version. Right? That's the one thing. Another thing that really stands out is becoming a world citizen. So if you experience diversity in everyday life, you will have a regular exposure to people, cultures, traditions, and practices that are unlike your own, which lends itself to, productivity. So you will learn skills, you will learn how to interact with communities and understand different concepts. And that's so important when you consider, I'm a white South African, middle-aged South African living, and I come from Johannesburg in the West Rand. But you, Ginger, are from a different place in South Africa. You come from a different set of rules. And when you consider becoming a world citizen, right? I don't know if you've experienced, but that moment when you get on a plane and you kind of land in Europe, or you land in Australia, or you land in the USA, you kind of settle in and you start paying attention to who these people are. Your brain literally is in a different perspective, from a different associative, your association to your environment is completely different, right? So your brain starts asking a different set of questions. So not only is that the point of understanding diversity, but it also lends itself to really engaging yourself from a personal perspective on understanding and creating curiosity for why people do what they do. And I think, South Africa's South Africa, for we have our history, we have such a turmoiled history that we can reference from. And the importance about that is that we actually learn from where we come from, so that we actually understand and embrace the fact that we have the diversity that we do. It lends itself to becoming a citizen of the world and becoming one of those people who speak in terms of world kind of, what do you call it? When you recognize yourself from a different perspective the whole time. One of the recent conversations I've had with a South African who now lives in the US mentions that from a US perspective, and she's been living there for 15 years, and what she's been experiencing is they don't have a sense of what Ubuntu is, right? They don't have a sense of it. They don't know, they don't relate to it. They kind of go, well, that's like this thing, this like, please explain it. They really don't have, and yet we as South Africans, very often we take it for granted that it's something that as a beautiful message that sort of goes from a South African perspective, we all relate to it. We all know what it feels like, what the energy of Ubuntu is, and we have that correlation, So I think because we very often don't become curious enough about our culture and how diverse we are, we sometimes debilitate our own process. We debilitate our own moment, and don't give ourselves enough praise and upliftment because we have the diversity we do, because people don't have reference to it.
Yeah. So Kevin, what I want to understand from you, are you saying to me that it's important for employers to address these issues concerning cultural diversity, to actually be more of we need to uplift our minds to be more globalized, because the world is becoming smaller anyways, and to acknowledge people, respect them as they come from different walks of life, because from that we can learn. So in the light of that, then who is responsible for creating that kind of culture within the organization? Is it the employer? Is it the employee? Who is responsible for embedding such a culture that embraces cultural diversity in an organization?
Well, that's a very interesting question to raise, because very often as an employee, I will go, well, it's not my problem. Why must I make it my problem? Like, you're the employer here. And I think as a general rule, it's so much easier to throw my hands up in the air and go, well, it's not my problem. It's not my issue. It's not my responsibility. And I do believe, and that's why I do what I do. When we look at perspective from facilitating leadership programs, we work from middle management all the way through to top C-suite executives. And we look at how do you create, where does it start? How do you create leadership within yourself, within your own space to influence your environment? It is never a case of going, oh, well, as soon as those people over there start doing something, then things are going to change. So it's a principle that, we live by from an NLP perspective, that you have to be responsible for the environment that you're in and how you respond to your environment. Because if you don't, blame is really easy, but blame also means that I don't have to take responsibility. So when it comes to cultural diversity, when it comes to where it needs to start with me. It needs to, where you and I, who are in very different cultures with very different backgrounds, can have this conversation, right? We can show up and we can go, so what's your view and what's your view? And let's have that conversation. And I think that's where the key of even the message that I want to drive home today is it starts with me. It always starts with me. And
I suppose you're saying, Kevin, sorry to interject there, be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, before we came online, that's exactly the sentiment we both spoke about. Is Lisa, I don't know if you know Lisa Nichols. She's an amazing motivational speaker from the US. One of the things she speaks about, and one of the things she makes note of, and just in my own words, she says, don't make me the hero in the world because you're too lazy to be one. Right? And when that lands in your head, you kind of go, okay, so what does it mean to start cultivating diversity within my environment? What does it mean to be more tolerant to people who are not like me? What does it mean? How do I start showing up, and how do I start paying attention to why people are different? And I've seen a slogan that goes, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a slogan that's sort of all over the internet at the moment. Don't look down at someone who speaks a different language than you. It means that they actually speak more than one language. And it's so true. When we just, through our own biases, we kind of go, okay, well, that's not something I relate to, so I can't confirm that that's important. So I just do it from my perspective. And that's, and I think, even COVID, if you consider COVID, and what it's taught us is awareness. We simply have to be aware of who we are, how we show up, and how we are in the world. How do we behave in the world? It's not a case of taking it for granted anymore. You're going to show up, because if you're not, it may affect you. It may physically affect your life. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for what we need to start paying attention to in the world.
One of our viewers actually just wrote something that's quite interesting. He's Mandi Degana. He says, and I feel where the employer isn't taking initiative, it is upon the employee to hold the employer accountable. If we don't, as employees, ask questions, then nobody feels the pressure to set up. I think that's quite a very important point, Mandi, that you've raised there, that both are accountable to create this culture that is aware of other people's diversity and the uniqueness of an individual. So it's what would you have to say about that, Kevin?
Absolutely. I think where I'm always careful when people go, it's important to bring that question to my employer's mind is, yes, it is, but don't leave it as his responsibility. Bring it to his attention and absolutely say, you know what, I do believe that we need this and this and this, and preface that. And how you execute that will be really important. But also remember and go with an entry point of taking responsibility for it. Because your employer might turn around and go, okay, well, what do you think we should do? And if you go, well, I don't know, I think it's important. That's not useful. It's not useful for me to come and point a finger. But yet, when I get to wanting to make something happen, I don't have a solution. We can't be in a world where we're constantly pointing a finger and say, you need to make this happen, without solutions. So go with the solution and say, well, this is what I think, this is what we could do. And by doing that and showing up and putting yourself in a position of power and showing up with a solution is far more useful in currently, quite specifically in South Africa. We need more solutions than we need problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I get you. And one of the characteristics or traits that we as employers need to embed as a culture in our organizations is resilience. I do know that you've been running a lot of workshops and training programs on resilience. It's one of the greatest characteristics an employee can have, especially in these challenging times. As I said earlier on, it helps you to be able to deal with the challenges and still stay engaged, within the organization. So why should businesses focus on resilience in the workplace? Why should employers focus on creating resilience and embedding it as a culture in the organization?
So, and again, resilience is this beautiful crutch word that's being thrown around now, because people, they keep, organizations are going, we need to be resilient, and we need to start making sure that people know what that looks like, and so people are already having an association to resilience. Is like, oh dear, like, what does this mean? Just more training, more, and for me, from my perspective, is we really need to be careful on the entry point that we go in with resilience, because I'm going to give you a quick story. There's a professor, he's called David Wallace Foster. He speaks about there's an old little fish swimming in the sea, and he comes across two little fish, and he goes, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And carries on swimming. And as he comes past, one little fish looks at the other and is like, "What the hell is water?" Right? And the point of the story is the most important realities that are the hardest to see are the hardest to talk about, right? And very often, when we don't even pay attention to what resilience looks like, how do we show up in a work environment, we often overlook. And the fact of the matter is, people are working harder at the moment than they've ever worked, because now suddenly you don't have to deal with traffic. You're not going to be late. You can clock in at 8 o'clock when you need to. And because of that, it's afforded us an ability to work at a distance, but it's also afforded us to, for the corporates out there to start adding on workload, right? So when it comes to resilience, and you're kind of going, oh, well, what the hell do we do now? Because now I've just got more work and more work and more work. Part of being resilient, and one of the key areas that we touch on, is specifically building boundaries. Building boundaries and creating a new habit. And the reason for that is, I'm sure, you may have noticed in the workspace, very often when people don't have boundaries, they very often get stood on, right? The flip side of that is, very often people don't know what a boundary looks like. And what we've come across in the training is, people don't even realize that a simple conversation can really place a boundary in place. And it's you can have a good conversation with someone and say, okay, this is okay, but this is not okay. And it really, really lends itself to starting to establish your boundaries in how you do what you do in your environment. And, it lends itself back to what the culture is about and how we start creating that culture in the workspace. Because if we don't have and let's be honest, the backgrounds that we've, I know from my parenting, the influence that my parenting had was, you listen, you shut up when I tell you to shut up, and if you don't, I'm going to give you a hiding, right? That's the kind of the background that I grew up with in my world. And today, a lot of people go through that because they still have that kind of limiting belief around being able to show and stand up for themselves, right? So it all starts feeding back into, how do I do me? How do I show up? Do I put boundaries in place? If I'm not putting boundaries in place, I know that people are going to walk all over me. And part of that boundary is, this is my culture. This is, I'm different than you. Part of that is your boundary. and being able to voice that, but voice it in a way that is not offensive, because you just, because the way that you communicate is gonna set off, because we're so different. But essentially, the bottom line is the foundation of how you build your resilience is starting to understand that we have to build boundaries. You have to start creating that. The second thing to resilience, just to add to that, is creating effective habits. So very often we don't know, we call it your DMO, your daily method of operation. And very often people don't have one, right? They just kind of wake up and they're like, oh God, I've hit snooze about 7 times. Let me quickly get up and rush to the bathroom, do that, and then rush to the PC, put the PC on and get to work, right? They don't have a daily method of operation. And what's beautiful about that is it creates a rhythm for you from a Monday to a Friday. When you know what your method of operation is on a daily basis, you kind of go, okay, cool. At 7:30, I'm doing that. By 6:45, I'm doing that. By 8 o'clock, I'm doing that. And then you kind of start fixing that as a daily method of operation. And part of that daily method of operation is looking after yourself. And part of looking after yourself is building those boundaries, right? So really, it's sort of encircles and sort of envelops everything about how you show up in the world on a consistent basis. And the last one that I want to mention is your locus of control. Very often people and it comes back to, where does diversity start? Where does that culture really start driving? Is you have to consider that what you have control over is you, how you respond and how you behave, and what attitude you approach with. It's you. You do not have control over what the manager is going to decide, how the manager is going to play out. You do not have control over external things in your world. You have control over how you respond to the external things. And the moment we start focusing, there's something called in your brain, it's called your reticular activation system. We call it your RAS for short. So in your reticular activation system, what it says is, I will focus on whatever I'm focused on, and my brain will focus on it. But then my brain will find supporting evidence to support what I'm focused on, right? If my locus of control is consistently on what other people are doing and how other people are doing it, because those people, all I'm doing is my RAS, my reticular activation system, is activated in something else over there all the time. Then part of my brain starts finding supporting evidence to support what I'm focused on over there. And it becomes a quick way, a very sure way of debilitating yourself in enabling you to be able to move forward, right? So coming back to culture and diversity, where am I focused? Am I focused on my culture and do I embrace it? Am I the one that says, okay, cool, if I want to embrace cultural diversity in my workspace, how much do I know about that person? How much do I know about what their culture is? How much do I pay attention to what makes that person tick? Because then suddenly my locus of control sits here with me, and my behavior is enabled to be able to cultivate that.
So just to interject there quickly, Kevin, so you're saying to me, when we go back to cultural diversity, one of the important things that we need to do as employees and employers is to be aware that people are different from us, is to be aware and pay attention to the other norms and standards that other people are used to, rather than how I am used to doing things. So it's a matter of getting out of your own cocoon and understanding and appreciating that there's someone else out there who does things different from you. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. That's that in the simplest way. I mean, that's exactly the way you just said it now. If I just consume my life with my version of the story, then I will forever have my own biases, my own limiting beliefs, my own version of the story. When you consider when people who have traveled a lot, they go into a new environment and they experience culture in a way that they are not used to, right? if you speak to someone who has traveled a lot, those people's entry point in what culture and diversity looks like is so profound compared to someone who doesn't travel, someone who's not interested in the world, someone who's not interested in your perspective, someone who's closed off to well, you're different looking than me, so that must mean X, Y, and Z. If we are not aware of ourselves and how we show up in the world, we are sure to fail at so much more. Okay. But the moment I start taking cognitive attention to, well, what does this mean and how am I responsible? I think Oprah actually once said, if only people would realize and consider that I am responsible for the energy that I bring into this moment. And if you've got bad energy, please don't come into my moment. Right?
Okay.
I'm responsible for my energy that brings to this moment. If you come in there with the wrong energy, you're probably going to get the wrong energy.
Absolutely.
And it just brings it back to the locus of control. It brings it back to my leadership. It brings it back to, how do I show up in the world? If I want to see more culture and if I want to see diversity, if I want to own it and claim it, how much do I do in aim of it?
Okay. Tell me, Kevin, what I also want to understand is, are there any types of resilience or resilient traits that one has to have? And what are those, if there are any?
You know, resilience, when I was doing research on resilience, it's kind of, it's quite the vague kind of topic to be able to train on. And okay. You know, if you look at what the dictionary says about resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness.
Yeah.
So when you consider that and you go, okay, well, what does that mean and how do I do that? So again, you know, from practical experience, from seeing how it's worked in an environment where you do training, very often, I think one of those attributes quite specifically would be how much do you pay attention to how you're doing in your own world before pointing a finger? Because part of being able to get up and do it again tomorrow, there has to be an essence and a value that you hold dear for yourself. And the moment you start paying attention to that, part of your brain can connect to that. You know, one of the studies that are happening in the world is the reasoning for feeling disconnected. And a lot of people who feel disconnected have addictive behaviors. So when you start considering, what does connection really mean, right? Tony Robbins speaks about acknowledgement, and he says the one thing that we all have in common as human beings is acknowledgement. So there's a flip side to that. So if you're going, okay, if the one thing is acknowledgement that I'm looking for as a human being, the next question is how much acknowledgement do I give myself, right? And coming back to the earlier point where South Africans don't even, we very often take Ubuntu for granted because we kind of know what it is. We know what it is. We've seen it. You know, there's so many things that have happened in the last 25 years of democracy that's kind of been quite significant around Ubuntu. And yet other countries, other nations have no idea what that means, right? So it's really starting to pay attention, bringing back to awareness, like the attributes to being resilient is the awareness of self. And how do I do that more effectively? And how do I do it at level 10?
Okay, all right. So what are the ways that one can embark on in order to boost their level of resilience?
So I think it lends itself to everything we've been saying so far. And some of the important points that really affect how we do resilience is considering your biases. And I'm going to give you an idea of what biases are. So very often our biases, we jump on the bandwagon And the bandwagon effect is an actual bias that where we support opinions as they become popular. So very often we'll just jump on that bandwagon effect and kind of go, oh, well, that's popular. So yeah, I agree with it because everyone does. But there's that. For example, a halo effect. When you have a positive tendency towards something or someone, you kind of create a halo around them and kind of go, no, I like them more because I relate to them. I think they're good looking. I like what they're saying. And again, it becomes a bias, right? Whether this person tells you the truth or not the truth, whether this person lies to you about something and makes you feel bad, because you have some kind of bias towards it, you tend to want to move towards it. And then we also have illusions of control as a bias, where we believe that we have more control over our situations than we really do. So again, lending itself back to self-awareness. And there's one more thing that really stands out, is something called state, story, and strategy. So on the state, story, and strategies, coming back to being resilient in your environment, what we know from human behavior is there's an amazing doctor called, he's a neuroscientist called Dr. Andrew Huberman. He speaks around neuroscience and how human behavior affects people and what that looks like, and he does a lot of studies. But one of the things he speaks about is we often don't realize that when we can see effective strategies in someone's behavior, very often if we start doing the behavior, it triggers us into a different state. And because it triggers us into a different state, we start thinking things differently, right? And not to get all technical and science about it, but when we start affecting our brains around how we start feeling, our brain starts firing in a different space, literally in your brain, right? And you have different chemicals that's firing off. And the more I find myself in a more positive, more feeling good body capacity, the more my brain has the ability, and this is the clincher of it, the more my body has the ability to make different decisions. So to give you a practical example, if you're feeling really angry, right? If you're feeling really angry, having a happy thought is really hard, right? If you're feeling really, really elated and really on top of the moon, when someone drives across the stop street, I tend to go, damn, dude, you're gonna, careful you don't hurt someone, right? Based on the fact that that's how our brains are put together. So that's really state. So how we feel really determines what's gonna happen next. That's the one thing. The second thing is story. So when we find ourselves in a story, and that story being, I'll give you a practical example. I have had someone in my world who every time I speak to this person is a divorced person. So you'll speak to her and then she'll go, yeah, it's very difficult because I'm divorced. And then we're like, well, but we're just talking about general, how are you doing? Like how's life? But the story that she keeps herself into the whole time is every time we have a conversation, it ends up about divorce, right? And tying back into the question you're asking, like how do we get to those resilient moments, is I really have to start changing the story. Because coming back to your reticular activation system, the more I'm focused on what happened and what was wrong with that moment, the more I'm driving and finding supporting evidence on how to drive my story forward, right? Okay. And as a person who's responsible, I really need to start wrapping my brain around changing the story. The last one is your strategy. Go and pay attention to effective leaders in the world. Go and look at their strategy. Like, what do they do? How do they do every single day? How do they get up? What are their conversations? What do they keep themselves busy with? What do leaders in the world speak about? Start paying attention to what successful strategies look like. Because if I can attune myself to a great state and start creating a good story, I can start having a great strategy in moving my life to a different space. And tying back to resilience and culture, that's exactly where the responsibility lies, again, with self, is what is my state? What is the story I'd like to start telling? And what strategy am I using to get there?
Okay. All right. So talking about good leadership, or rather successful leadership, can you just tell us what is it then? What is good leadership in the corporate world? In an organization, what are the traits of good leadership?
Wow, talk about being put on the spot here. I think good leadership. There's an amazing speaker. He used to be the chief marketing operator for the chief marketing officer for Deloitte in America, and his name's Keith Ferrazzi. He does a lot of talks on YouTube. He does a lot of conversation, and I think what we're starting to recognize from a leadership perspective is, first of all, the self-leadership that we've been speaking about the whole time. That self-awareness, that's key. The second thing is we really need to start understanding, and that's beautiful because it lends itself to culture. And we need to start cultivating a culture around collaboration, because a different view or a different insight to that is creating or having a co-creation of sorts, right? When we start going, well, you know what, let's collaborate on this, because you and I right now are collaborating. This is a collaboration of messaging, right? So two minds have come together. We're having a great conversation. We're sharing it with people. Keith Ferrazzi says the key to the future of how we do business is people are really, really starting to pay attention to how much time do I have for my life, for myself and my family. And if I can collaborate with you and get something done in a shorter space of time and still get a good result, hey, let's collaborate, right? It's imperative that we come to the party and start paying attention to how else can we start collaborating. Because the moment we wrap our brains around that, the success is so much easier to reach. And the third thing is empathy. One of the key attributes that and you can speak to any successful leader in the world. You speak to anyone who really deals with people on a daily basis, especially from a coaching perspective, people who have achieved great things with people. Empathy in itself is something that really relates to, I see you, you see me, right? When I start paying attention to you and really considering who you are and how you show up in the world, and I go, wow, I hear you, I acknowledge you, I see you, I see why this moment for you is difficult, right? When I come to the party and I bring that energy to that moment, me showing up as a leader, by tenfold, I increase my ability as a leader in that space. So even with the leadership programs that we run and we facilitate, the way that we do it, very often, because we sometimes ask very difficult questions. Very often, as the facilitator, as the one running the program, I have to have one-on-one meetings afterwards, or to get back to what we're doing, how we're doing, what we're doing, purely based on the fact that I need to be able to empathize and hear where that person's coming from. So I think those are three of the most important attributes that leaders in the world can have today, and definitely a theme that's running around the world at the moment are those three.
As a way of wrapping up tonight's topic, cultural heritage and culture in the workplace, what can you say to South Africans, both the employer and the employee, regarding, and it's Heritage Month? What words of encouragement, what words of wisdom, what words of enlightenment would you say to them regarding heritage and culture within the workplace?
I think, and it's not a very large, sentiment I have, but it's a very significant one. And I think when we look at our comfort zone, right? In my comfort zone, I'm comfortable here. It's because I'm comfortable. It's mine, right?
Yeah.
What we need to start realizing is when I'm outside my comfort zone, the degree of my discomfort is the degree of my learning. So although we find ourselves in situations where having a difficult conversation sometimes about someone's culture or understanding them, it may be a very difficult, and it might be very uncomfortable, might be throwing you right out of your comfort zone. Yeah. But the degree of your discomfort is the degree of your learning. And I think that's the most important thing that as someone who does this on a regular basis, someone who hears and listens and helps and motivates people all the time, your degree of your discomfort is your degree of your learning. And if you can embrace that sentiment, just about anything is going to be a lot easier.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Kevin Brits. Ladies and gentlemen, we had Kevin Brits, who works at Business by Design. If you'd like to follow him, where can they find you? Where can people see your work? Where can people find you? Maybe you've got contact details or you are on social media. Just let us know, where can people find you?
I think the easiest would be, you can check out the website, businessbydesign.co.za, or you can just hashtag lunchtime coaching. If you type in Google hashtag lunchtime coaching, one word, a whole bunch of videos will come up. All my details are there, and you can just click through. And there's a lot of you can even type in my name into Google. There's a lot that comes up. You'll find me pretty quickly. So Business by Design or hashtag lunchtime coaching.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kevin Brits, for coming through. Thank you to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. We've learned a lot today, that it starts with you. Be aware of your space and understand and accept other people who are different from you. And do not shift the responsibility of embedding a good culture in your workplace to your boss or your manager. The responsibility starts with you. So thank you so much, Kevin Brits. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching and staying throughout the 1 hour that we always have every Wednesday. My name is Ginger, and I'm the founder of Ginger the Voice. We're a communications company. We seek to give hope, courage, enlightenment through different platforms such as MC, singing, speaking, and also talk show host. Thank you so much for tuning through, and good night, and God bless you.
Thanks, Ginger. Ciao, ciao.